Language matters, especially when we're talking about people's identities. And when it comes to talking about disability, we know that you probably have some questions. We've got you. Today, we're talking about how to talk about disability. Hi, I'm Ariel with Unexpected Virtual Tours and Training, your destination for radically creative virtual events and training for remote and hybrid teams. Today, we're talking about language. Whether you're writing an email, leading a meeting, or simply sharing someone's story, the words you use to describe someone are really important. The way we talk about other people can either affirm their identity and humanity or unintentionally diminish it. And that is definitely true when we're talking about disabilities. But we know that talking about disability can seem hard for some people. There are a lot of choices, and language, of course, changes over time. But don't let this stop you. So here's a quick primer on how to engage respectfully. One of the most common questions is whether to use person-first language or identity-first language. If you're wondering about the difference, person-first language puts the person before the disability. So instead of saying disabled person, you'd say person with a disability. The logic here is that this kind of phrasing emphasizes the individual first, before any condition or diagnosis. This approach emerged as a way to push back against the long history of oppression and discrimination that disabled people have faced. It was a way to challenge dehumanizing terms and attitudes that were especially common in the past. For a long time, people with disabilities were often treated as problems to be solved or as tragic figures. This person-first language is a reminder about people's humanity. Person-first language was meant to say, hey, this is a person, not a diagnosis. Eventually, this phrasing became standard in many professional and academic spaces, and saying person with autism or person who uses a wheelchair is still considered respectful in many settings, particularly when the speaker isn't sure what someone prefers. But over time, a lot of disabled people have said that that's not the whole picture. That's where identity-first language comes in. Identity-first language flips the structure. Instead of saying person with a disability, you say disabled person. Instead of person with autism, you say autistic person. Instead of person with ADHD, it's ADHD person. For many, this isn't about reducing themselves to a condition. Instead, it's about recognizing that their disability is an integral part of who they are. It's not something separate, not an add-on, and most importantly, not something to distance themselves from. All right, think about it this way. We don't say person with tallness or person with blackness. We say tall person or black person. In the same way someone disabled, people feel that person-first language subtly implies that disability is something that can be separated from who they are and their experience of the world, something they carry rather than something that simply is. The autistic and deaf communities are especially vocal about this. Many autistic self-advocates see autism as a fundamental part of how they interact with the world, not a disease or disorder to be ignored. The deaf community, particularly those who use sign language and see deafness as a cultural identity, also largely prefer identity-first language. It's not just about their hearing ability, it's about shared experiences and culture. So, which one's correct? The honest answer is, it depends. Different individuals and communities have different preferences. There's no universal rule, which is why it's always best to try to pay attention to what people use to describe themselves. If someone says, I'm a disabled person, then that's what you should say too. If you have a good relationship with someone, you can also ask, what do they prefer? Or maybe ask a trusted mutual friend. And while we're here, let's talk about euphemisms. Sometimes people still refer to disabled people as handicapped or differently abled. This can come from good intentions of wanting to recognize people's strengths and inherent humanities. But a lot of disabled people find these terms patronizing or infantilizing, and these kinds of phrases tend to dance around the reality of disability, as if the word itself is too negative or harsh to say out loud. But disabled is not a bad word. Trying to sugarcoat it, it doesn't make it more respectful. It often has the opposite effect. The goal isn't to avoid saying disabled or avoid talking about disability. Instead, the goal should be to describe disability accurately, respectfully, and in a way that reflects how the person or group identifies. When we use soft or overly positive language to avoid discomfort, we're usually centering our own feelings instead of focusing on what the disabled person actually wants. So here are a few practical takeaways. First, when talking about a group, try to figure out what that community generally uses, since some groups, like the deaf and autistic communities, have preferences. Second, as we mentioned, you can always pay attention to how people describe themselves to figure out what they prefer. You can also ask. Just be sure not to make a big show of asking, which would again put the focus on yourself. And once you know, be sure to respect that choice. Third, avoid euphemisms that downplay or insult disability in an attempt to be nice. Use direct, respectful language. It's better than being folksy. At the end of the day, person-first and identity-first language both come from a desire to show respect. But real respect means listening to disabled people and using the words they choose for themselves. There's no shame in asking, no harm in learning, and no need to overthink every sentence. Just be thoughtful, be open, be willing to keep updating your choices as language changes over time. Want to keep learning more about the differences between person-first and identity-first language? Well, we've dropped some resources below the video. Be sure to check out our Disability Pride virtual event. In it, we showcase many incredible disabled activists as well as activists with disabilities.